Hey, my name is Sam Fowler. It is a privilege to be here. As you heard, Tim is delayed on his flight, which is code for he found someone in the airport who might be willing to play quarterback for the Cardinals and wanted to convince him to come down here. But it's a privilege always to be here with y'all at Community of Grace, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. We have kind of a neat subject to talk about, but before we get there, I was online and I was Googling something, and somehow I came across Time Magazine had the 50 worst inventions in history listed. It was quite an interesting list, and I wanted to just share a couple with you. I don't know, some of you were around in 1985 when New Coke came out. You remember this? And 3 months after it came out, we were all begging for Coke to come back, and we've been drinking Coca-Cola Classic ever since, okay? Time Magazine considered that one of the worst inventions of all time. It might have been one of the best marketing ploys of all time, okay? Because Coca-Cola Classic sales sailed after that. But there's some other things that were on the list that were kind of interesting. Apparently, they felt that, in retrospect, that subprime mortgages weren't the best idea ever. The Ford Pinto. So be honest, how many of you owned one at some point during your life? Yes. Congratulations, you owned the worst car ever invented, according to Time. This one, Snuggies. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like the blanket pajama thing. It wasn't just Snuggies. It was the idea of Snuggies for dogs. Dog people are just interesting. But what was interesting, I read through the whole list, and what struck me was what was not on it. Because I am completely convinced that this is the worst invention in history, and that is the roller coaster. It is. Okay, let's just be, how many of you love roller coasters? What is wrong with you? Y'all need Jesus or something, because let me explain. This is an invention that was designed to hurl you into the air, flip you, twist you, turn you at 1,000,000 miles an hour, built by the lowest bidder. Okay? And you think that's a good idea. Now, I might be a little bit biased, I'll be honest, because in the Fowler family, who is a twisted family to begin with, my grandfather, okay, took me on my first roller coaster. I don't know, I was 5, 6 years old. It was at Seattle Center. Now, my grandfather, who served the Lord Jesus Christ as a minister for 40 years, did this to his 6-year-old grandson. We got on the roller coaster. You know how all roller coasters start, right? It's the long ride up to your pending death. You know what I'm talking about? And so I got in the car with him, or the whatever they call that thing, and he began to say things that were incredibly encouraging, like, "Did that bolt look loose to you, Sam? Sam, did you see that guy that's running this thing? I don't know if he's all here." Well, we shouldn't worry about it. I heard that this project wasn't fully completed, but no one's died yet, so we should be okay. Okay? This is the family I grew up in, all right? So as a 6-year-old, I'm on the roller coaster, scared to death with my grandfather, okay? And I've had a lifelong issue with roller coasters ever since. So a month ago, I'm with my 2 teenagers at Universal Studios, and for my latest roller coaster experience, I thought, all right, I'm dad now. I have 2 teenagers. I got to be cool. So I took them to Universal Studios, and I thought, we're going to start out this day easy, because they have rides there and a couple roller coasters. We're going to start out easy. We're going to go to Harry Potter World. Yes! It was horrible. All right? Now, Harry Potter World I thought would be great. Kids stuff, how bad could it be, the Harry Potter ride? So we go through the line, we get in there, and then the Harry Potter ride, you sit 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of and you're all strapped in like this, okay? So you're not looking at each other, and then they take you on this thing, and it's not so much that it's a how do I say this, a physically challenging experience. I mean, that they're doing this all over the place and whatnot. It was the idea that the wonderful people at Universal decided to put all sorts of video images flying at you, okay? With the idea of you're not really going to die, you just think you're going to die, okay? And so as we were kind of going around, they take you through all of Harry Potter's world, and you're moving, and so far, you know, for the first 30 seconds, I'm doing okay, until the dragon popped out. And then I was a little scared, all right? But I got to play it cool, I'm dad, and so we keep going, and pretty soon we're on the broomstick, and we're flying everywhere, and then we go over the castle, and boom, just like that. And that's when I thought that Jesus was coming to take me home. For the next 90 seconds, I literally closed my eyes and prayed that God would just end this. What I really wanted to do was scream and say, get me off this ride. But I knew if I did that, then I'd have to turn in my man card for getting off the Harry Potter ride at the end of the deal. But I got through it. But it was interesting, even in the middle of Harry Potter, I kid you not, it is amazing when you get a little bit scared how Bible verses from Daily Vacation Bible School start coming back. And I started quoting Psalm 46. All right, first line, I'll read it to you. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. And I prayed right there, God, if you get me off this ride, I will tell those great folks at Community of Grace to never go on the Harry Potter ride ever. Okay? But forgetting my roller coaster issues for just a minute, I want to read that line to you again. Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. And I want you to just take that in for a minute. We're going to read the rest of it in just a moment, but I want to ask you this morning, do you believe that? Now, don't be too quick, because what this really gets into is the whole concept, is God a safe place for you and I? Is God a safe place? Before you just give kind of a cookie-cutter Christian answer, we need to really consider what that means. Because in a moment, we're going to read through what this psalmist thought it meant. But at the bare minimum, we spent a lot of time over the last year here at Community of Grace talking all sorts of things about our images of God, how we understand God, how do we see God, who do we know God to be. And certainly, a lot of us have had formed through the years our image of God based on our relationship with other people who have been, well, for lack of a better word, almost God-like characters in our story. Parents, coaches, teachers, ministers, maybe those in authority, maybe even a boss. Those people who've shaped our understanding of who God is and how God might move. And so we take all those experiences in our life, and then we start reading the Bible. And if we're honest, we tend to read into the text that which we have experienced in our life in terms of how we understand God. And sometimes we read it, and I'm like, yep, that resonates with my experience. That's who God is. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes my experience or that which I have ascribed to God really isn't true at all, but I'm looking for it in here. And so you can come away with certain images of who God is that are ones that are wonderful, that God's a safe place, God's harsh, God's not safe at all, and everything in between. And so when we read Psalm 46, it's very interesting to get the perspective of at least one person who decided to write down how they understood God. I want to read it for you in its entirety. It says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Through its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fail. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fail. He lifts his voice, and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see the works of the Lord, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease of the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. And then this line, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Two things that are at least going on according to this person who wrote this. First one is this idea of refuge. That God is a safe place. Okay? Now just to tease that out for a minute, the idea of refuge, at least the way that this word is used in Hebrew, it's the idea of sanctuary. It's the idea that you can find safety. It's where we came up with the word to describe the room that we are all sitting in right now, okay? For years, we've described this as a sanctuary, correct? It's where God is. If you go back to the old tabernacle and temple, it's the Holy of Holies. That's where God is. You can find God there. That's a safe place. It's sanctuary. You are okay there, all right? And we've had different names throughout the years, but that's the idea. And so we can find refuge. But here's the thing. You find refuge with God. God is a safe place, but you don't get to stay in sanctuary because you don't get to withdraw from life. We don't just get to come here and stay and hide out forever. We get to find God as a safe place, so then we can get to God being strength and being help in time of trouble. Let me give you an example. I'm going to talk about my dad for a minute. When I was a second grader, we're just going through the journey of Sam's first and second grade and third grade life here for a minute. When I was a second grader, Mike Anderson came to my door and knocked on it and said, "Hey, Sam, do you want to go throw the football down in the neighborhood?" I lived on kind of a hill, and I'm like, yeah. Mike Anderson is asking me. He's a sixth grader. Sixth grader asking a second grader to come play football? You bet. So we go down to the neighborhood, and for about 5 or 10 minutes, we're tossing the football back and forth, right in the middle of the street, in front of all the houses. Pretty soon, about 3 or 4 other sixth graders come out from behind a house. And they come running over to us, and they all grab me from behind. And they got me locked there, all right? And apparently, they had all been teaching Tom, the second grader down the street, how to box. And they needed somebody that Tom could practice on. And so all the sixth grade boys held me in place while Tom took his fist and punched me in the stomach and punched me in the face and did all sorts of stuff while they taught him how to do it properly. In the meantime, I'm just crying. And pretty soon the boys started to laugh a little bit, and one of them kind of lost his grip, and I took off and ran home. Thank goodness I was fast. Ran all the way home. Just had gotten beat up. Ran downstairs, hopped on the couch, and for whatever reason that day, my dad was home from work early. And he came down and he sat on the couch and he said, "Sam, why are you crying?" And I began to tell my dad exactly what just happened. And my father put his arm around me. He said, "Sam, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened with you." And then he just was quiet. And in a wonderful, peaceful moment, he just kept his arm around me, and we watched cartoons for about a half an hour. That's all we did. It was refuge. It was safe place. And I didn't know it then, but looking back on it now, he was showing me a little bit about who God is. And I remember thinking, I wish I could stay on this couch forever with my dad because this feels safe. But I didn't get to stay on the couch. Because after about an hour, Dad said, "Okay, it's time for us to go back down the street." And he walked me back down the street to the boys, got their fathers out, and we had a whole conversation. That's where I found strength and ever-present help in trouble. Get what I mean? We find refuge with God. We find safety with God. But we don't just get to hide out and stay there. It's for the idea that we get to go back out to this roller coaster thing called life and keep living and keep working through it. It is not a promise that God takes away all of the problems. Sometimes we think, oh, well, God's not a safe place because he's not taking care of all of the issues. That's not the promise. The promise is God is with us, strength and help in trouble through it all. And then there's this other line. This is the second part of the psalm that kind of gets to me. And I have seen this sentence, this line, at Hobby Lobby 25 times. Yes, I go to Hobby Lobby, and I'm proud. It says, "Be still and know that I am God." Now remember, the rest of this psalm is God having dominion over the earth, God causing wars to end, breaking the bow, splitting the spear, all sorts of warrior-like God stuff. It is no wonder that this is the psalm that Martin Luther got the inspiration to write the hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." This is where it comes from. But then there's that line, "Be still and know that I am God." And I've heard it all sorts of times, and oftentimes it's kind of that idea of I need to be quiet, reverent before the Lord, and certainly there's an element of that. But the word "still" in Hebrew actually means let it go. Release. Release it. And the concept is you can come find refuge with God so that you can release that which you need to release to God and go forth from there. Right? It's what we practice here every time we gather in a worship service. We come here for refuge. we find safety, and in just a few moments, we are going to participate in release through the act of communion. We give it to God. It is not refuge so we can retreat. It is refuge so we can release. And that idea of being still and knowing that you know that God is with us, God is for us, and God is never against us. That's a very powerful concept that the psalmist was trying to get through. And so even when life has its twists and turns and turbulence, all of that stuff that you would experience, say, like on a roller coaster, it's that idea that you can still find safety with God. God is a safe place, but you don't just get to hide out. One last story about my father, going to third grade now. They came up with a brilliant idea that we were going to go for a family night on the town, and we went to the old spaghetti factory. You all know about this? Kid heaven, all right? Huge plate of spaghetti, all right? All of the bread you can eat, and then the wonderful mint ice cream at the end. That was, oh, man, it was so awesome. It was great. I loved that dinner right up until my dad said, let's go to Seattle Center. And I thought, wait a second, that's where that roller coaster is that Grandpa took me on that they didn't complete yet. And so we went to that exact same place, and we got on that exact same roller coaster, my father, myself, and my little sister who's scared of nothing. And I kid you not, my father got on that roller coaster, and the first words out of his mouth were, Sam, you think that bolt's a little loose? And then said, did you see the guy running this thing? I'm not quite sure he's all there. And, I thought I heard that they had never entirely finished this project. I kid you, I'm like, did you call Grandpa and decide how you were going to torture me through my, It was crazy. So we go up the thing, same idea. Got all the way down, and I was praying the whole time, God, just keep me safe. Just keep me safe. Just keep me safe. Got down, and I thought, phew, got through that. Okay, we don't have to go on anymore. They said, let's go to this one right over here. Now, the one right over here goes like this. Around and around and around, except it goes up and down, up and down, up and down, around and around and around and around. And Stacy and my father loved it, and I hated it. And we got off, and they went out the front, and I went out the back, and I did what third grade boys do when they've been to the old spaghetti factory and they've been scared and a little bit sick. We spent the next half an hour at the park. A little while later, we're walking back, and as a family, my father sees one of the maintenance workers cleaning up the mess. And he goes, oh, look what some kid did. And I immediately burst into tears. And he realized it was his son. It was a very quiet ride home. When we got home, I went to my room, hopped in the bunk bed, and a few moments later, my dad came. He came in and he said to me, I'm sorry, Sam. I'm really sorry. I know you probably hated that. I just never want you to be afraid of trying things. Never want you to be scared to kind of go for something and get out there. And I realized you hated the roller coaster, and I probably should have never made you go on that other ride after you were pale white coming off the coaster. He goes, but I just want you to know I'm here with you, and I promise that I will never do that to you again, but I want you to never be afraid to go for it. And then he did something. He reached in his pocket, and he handed me his act of atonement, which was a silver dollar. Now, here's the interesting part. This is the exact silver dollar that he handed me 30 years ago. And every now and again, I keep it in my pocket as just a reminder that I got a picture from my father, and I was fortunate enough from him to get a picture of how God operates. That every now and again, I find refuge there, and I find release there a lot. I can be still and know that he is God. This morning, I don't know what you walked in with. I don't know what's going on in your life. But I would hope and pray that you would be able to find a safe place with God and a safe place here. And as we bow our heads for a moment, in just a second, we're going to come practice release through communion as a family together. Fair enough? Let's pray. God, for the folks that are here this morning that have gathered in this place, I would pray that they would be able to find refuge in you. They would be able to find sanctuary and safety in all of the good things that allow us to deal with the fears and anxieties of life. But God, I pray that we don't stay there, that our experience of you would allow us to remember and to know that we can release all of that stuff to you. All of the things that hinder and bind and wound, that we can lay them at your feet because that's what you've done for us through your work on the cross. God, this morning I pray as we enter into this time of taking the bread and the cup, that we would all be reminded that you are with us, you are for us, and you deeply, deeply love us. Amen.
Let's thank Sam for sharing God's word with us today.